All right, hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be going through a deep dive of malvertising. I'm going to go through what it is, how it works, how it can infect your computer, and the methods that it uses to attack people, and also how to protect yourself against it. This is kind of a follow-up video to the fileless malware video that I made. A commenter actually asked me to make a video breaking down malvertising, so I'm going to go over that in today's video because this is a great area to continue with. So let's just go ahead and get started with this. Okay, so we'll start out with how this goes from start to finish. We'll go through the different steps that happen when you have malvertising get on your computer or you get infected through malvertising. So the first thing is obviously you have to start with a malicious domain. Now there was a bunch of articles, I think it was about a year ago, where it made the news all over the place because there were a lot of malicious ads that were created and they were targeting legitimate pieces of software. And now usually Google's pretty strict with the ads that you can run on there. I know this from my days in doing media buying. There's a lot of requirements that you have to meet in order to be able to run Google ads, but these guys that were running these viruses were able to bypass these checks somehow. It was kind of a little bit of a black eye for Google as far as their advertising goes. But basically what ended up happening with this, and you could go read those articles if you want to get full context. Now, one of the pieces of software that was affected by this was OBS. Now, OBS's official URL is obsproject.com. And I don't remember what exactly the malware domains were that were used in that malvertising campaign, but it was something like obs-studio.com. So what people would see when they'd go to search this on Google, if you're not running ad block, is you end up getting pestered with ads all over the internet, which I'll get to that here in a little bit. I mean, they're completely running the internet at this point. I don't know how people can browse the internet without an ad blocker, and I'll give you some suggestions on dealing with this stuff here in just a little bit. But what happened here is people go and they see these ads, and the way that Google works is it makes it look like it's legit. Like you see obs-studio.com, when you go search for OBS, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's a legit link. And what they do is they mirror the website. Basically, they make it look like it's a legitimate website, but then you're getting a fake download and then you get infected with a virus. Now there's other ways that this can happen. It's not just domains that can do this. You could also be browsing on a completely legitimate website who uses a crappy advertiser network that doesn't vet stuff properly, and you can end up getting infected with malware. So I'm going to go over that here shortly. So now we'll go ahead and move on to embedded scripts. Now, usually what you'll see is these attacks happen a lot of times because of scripting in your browser. Now, there's things like NoScript, which is a extension that you can get for browsers. I mean, it does work pretty well and it can block a lot of threats. The problem is that you end up breaking a lot of stuff on the internet if you use it, because a lot of stuff on the internet relies on scripting to be able to display or work properly. Now, what you saw back in the old days, I don't know how many people are on here. I don't know how many people we've got that watch this channel that were part of the internet back in like the 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, all that kind of stuff. The Flash was a pretty common one, and this ended up getting discontinued eventually because there's so many security problems with the software here. And then the other one was VBScript. And as I was making this video, I ended up coming across an article just a day or two ago that Microsoft is getting ready to completely get rid of VBScript in Windows, which is, I mean, it's about time because it's old and it's not really useful for much these days. Whereas typically what you see these days is HTML5 and Java. Now, HTML5 ends up being a threat vector because you can do a lot of stuff with HTML5. It enables websites to do some pretty cool stuff. So, I mean, I'm not trying to make this stuff sound like it's bad, because it's certainly not. It's just, it's a man-made thing, therefore it can be exploited and hacked and all that kind of stuff. And the other one is JavaScript. I mean, like I said, if you block JavaScript on websites, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff that just isn't going to work properly. So I don't recommend, like I said, NoScript is good if you take the time to set it up properly, but like I said, it will end up blocking a lot of stuff, and it's really not necessary. I'll go over some protection methods here in just a little bit that will cover what you can do to protect yourself against this stuff, but it's really, like I said, I wouldn't worry about blocking scripting on websites. Now what happens is it usually ends up taking advantage of one of these issues here. So you could have a bug, like just a regular bug that's being taken advantage of. The other thing, and this isn't really covered much in the cybersecurity realm, at least that I've seen in any videos. Extensions are a huge problem, and I really would implore people, if you're gonna run extensions, really think about what it is that you're using and why you wanna use it. This came up as a commenter, which you could go read on the Fileless Malware. The comment is on there, and I replied to it. The person was talking about how their friend had been infected, or they found some infected code through an extension. This happens a lot. You can go check and read articles. Just Google something like malware web browser extensions. There's tons of them. One of the issues is that when you look at the permissions granted, is you're granting access to read data on all websites. They can access all sorts of stuff, which means that if you just take some random extension that they're going to be able to, let's say you go and put in your browser details and you've got a bad extension installed, they can go ahead and just pull all of that info from your browser. Now, so extensions are a huge thing. You know, you could have vulnerabilities in these, or the extensions themselves could be bad. They could have been written by a threat actor. Really be careful with the extensions that you're installing. The other thing with extensions is fingerprinting. Because I cover privacy quite a bit on this channel, I'll just cover fingerprinting real quick. Fingerprinting is things like what browser are you using, what graphics card are you using, what is the resolution that your monitors are running, what extensions are you using, all that kind of stuff. The more unique your fingerprint is, the more they can identify who you are. And browser fingerprinting is pretty nasty stuff. And it can be used to identify a person, even if you do things like conceal your IP address or you take a whole bunch of other privacy protection measures. Fingerprinting is really difficult to try to countermeasure against. And the more extensions you install, let's say you have 10 different extensions installed, chances are, with the amount of extensions that are out there, it all of a sudden makes your fingerprint way more unique than all the other people out there that, let's say they're just running one or two extensions. So let's say you have a browser with an ad block installed. Well, there's probably going to be a lot of other people with that same browser with that ad block installed as well. Therefore, your fingerprint would be less unique. But there are a ton of security problems with extensions. Be really careful what you're picking with these. The other thing that they can take advantage of with malvertising is 0 days. So let's say a threat actor figures out, oh, okay, here's a 0-day bug that we found. No one knows about it. No one's patched it yet. Let's go ahead and go start up an ad campaign and go ahead. So let's say that there's some sort of a 0-day virus affecting Windows 11 PCs. The threat actors have figured this out. It's not been patched yet. Then what they could do is make a malvertising campaign, go run ads. Windows 11 users are going to click on the ads or do whatever, and then all of a sudden they get affected. They get infected with malware because that 0 day is still present. And then the other thing is existing vulnerabilities. This is a little different than just 0 days or bugs or something like that. A perfect example of this would be like Windows XP. I mentioned this in my Fileless Malware video, that some moron went on there and called me stupid and said that, oh, well, I've been running Windows XP for years and I've never been infected, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and all this and that. And the guy was just an absolute moron. But the thing with that is, it's like, okay, well, if you get infected with Fileless Malware, you're never even gonna know. And like this guy said, oh, well, I run businesses off of Windows XP. It's like, oh, okay, so what end up happening is your customers end up getting their credit card information stolen because you think you're a know-it-all jackass that, oh, well, I've installed an antivirus, therefore I'm good, and I'm nostalgic about Windows XP, and therefore I'm perfectly fine. So now that we've covered that, let's cover the 3 common methods that are used by malvertising. So the first one is click-based triggers. Now with these, typically what you'll see is scripts of some sort. So like I said, typically using malicious scripting, taking advantage of like Java or HTML5, then you could end up getting redirected over to fake websites. So you click on something and then all of a sudden you go to a fake website. You click on something and a virus gets downloaded in the background. So like, could be a piece of Fileless malware, you could download a piece of ransomware or something like that. or redirect, which I'll cover redirects here in just a second because that's kind of its own method these days. Now, the next thing is tracking pixels. These are pretty nasty. Now, here's the way these work. So they're also called one-by-one GIFs. And here's a perfect example. If you aren't familiar with this, check out, so email, when I see email and clients, what tracking pixels, one of the things they get used for is emails. They track email open. So like, let's say you get put on a newsletter and then you all of a sudden stop getting the newsletter 6 months later. What that is they're tracking open rates and they're like, oh, okay, well, this person hasn't opened it. It hurts our email deliverability score. Let's go ahead and purge this person off the email list. Or let's say you open the email, the tracking pixel records that, so then you keep getting blasted with the same BS spam emails. What happens there is something called a tracking pixel gets embedded into those email. It's a one-by-one, typically it's like an invisible image. It's a piece of content that gets loaded remotely, and when a person opens it tracks that that person has loaded that image through their email address. And like I said, so that's how they track open rates. And if you ever want to test this, typically, so like if you go to Gmail, for example, and you click on an email, it just loads everything. So it will load those tracking pixels. Now, if you want to test this out and see this in action, use something like Thunderbird or Outlook. And when someone sends you a tracking pixel, so let's say you get an email and it's just text. Let's say it's like 2 or 3 paragraphs of text. And then you get a notification that pops up, usually like on Thunderbird or Outlook, it will say, this sender has included some sort of extra content. It's been blocked by like email or Thunderbird. Click show options if you want to see what the remote content is. And if you ever click on it and you don't see anything, that means that they embedded a tracking pixel in there. So like Thunderbird and Outlook and email clients like that will block stuff like that, partly because it's a security risk, but also because, like I said, it's used to violate people's privacy, and it tracks, like I said, it tracks open rates. Now, when I say tracking pixel, I'm also talking about it from the aspect of Facebook. So like I said, I used to be a media buyer, do advertising, all that kind of stuff. Now on Facebook, there's something called a pixel, and there's multiple forms of this, like Google has their own form of like analytics. It's basically like a piece of analytics. So let's say you go and log into Facebook, you're browsing around, and then you go to, or you don't even have to log into Facebook. Let's say you go visit a merchant website like Amazon or some small third-party store, some startup has their own merchant store. You're going and browsing through it. You're going over to Facebook. You browse around. That tracking pixel tracks your activity across all websites. And so people wonder, well, why the hell is Facebook able to show me ads for things that I search for? Well, part of it is because if you have the app installed on your phone, it's always listening to you. I know people think that's some sort of conspiracy theory. I'm telling you, I used to be in the advertising industry. This stuff gets tracked. If you go and open up Facebook, and let's say you're looking through posts and Facebook shows you something and you laugh at it, you don't even have to leave a like. They will record. They can see that, because when you're using these apps, you're giving them permission to access your contacts. You're giving them permission to access your camera and microphone. So when you go and you're looking through your feed and you see something and you like it or you laugh at it or something like that, that's recorded as an interaction. And then Facebook will say, okay, well, let's show them more of this, or they didn't like this, let's show them less of that kind of content. But that tracking pixel is also used to do things like profile what you buy, where you buy from, all that kind of stuff. It tracks a ton of stuff. Like, this is how Facebook is able to figure out how much money a person makes every year, what their sexual orientation is. Like, it can find out all sorts of stuff. Now, as far as malware goes, they are able to use tracking pixels for their own benefit. Now, so I'll cover tracking pixels here some more in just a little bit. So one of the things that can happen with tracking pixels is a tracking pixel can load on a website, and it can all of a sudden redirect to a malware website. So let's say they're running a malvertising campaign and they find a way to embed it. Now, like I said, with Google, when you try to run Google ads, I'll cover networking or ad networks here in more detail here pretty soon. When you do something like Google network ads or Google PPC, there's pretty strict requirements around that. Like, you can't just go and embed stuff like that. But what could happen is that you end up using these threat actors end up using lesser known ad networks. Like I said, I'll cover this here in a little bit. There's looser standards, looser policies, all that kind of thing. What they can do is load a tracking pixel, redirect you over to a malware website. Or it could be a threat actor that has a legit website that gets a lot of traffic, and they figure out a way to, in a sneaky way, redirect people over to malware websites. Now, the other thing is this can be embedded. So, like I said, this can happen like on the website side. This can happen on the advertising side. This happens on the email side. I know malvertising and email aren't the same thing. I'm just giving you an example here. The other thing is that this is invisible and it requires absolutely no action from someone. So the perfect example of this is, let's say you go visit a website. I'm sure everyone's had this happen at some point or another. You're browsing around on the internet, you're trying to find a piece of information or whatever. You browse to a website and you're like, oh, okay, well, this isn't a legit website. Before you can even have time to click out of it, it has already redirected you to another website that is malware laden, or there's a piece of malware on there and it's all of a sudden trying to do a bunch of stuff and infect your computer. That's what's referred to as a drive-by download. So this, like I said, this stuff's pretty nasty. You don't have to do anything to be infected by it. Now, the last thing that I'll cover here real quick is redirects, and then I'll go into this stuff down here. So with redirects, what ends up happening is you have basically, like, let's say clean site, and then you get redirected to malware site. So here's how this stuff works. So when you go and register domains through a domain registrar, is you can set up redirects. Now, like I said, this would come from the aspect of, let's say, someone who's trying to infect people, but they want to try and do it in a way that makes it look legit. Or, like I said, it also through the advertising side of things is, let's say they go and click on a link, but then they have set that link up to where it actually redirects to something else. Like I said, you shouldn't be seeing this with anything like the Google networks, because their standards and their security policies are a lot stricter. But like I said, we'll cover that here with ad networks here shortly. The other thing is you can end up being redirected to, let me just remake that line here real quick, stuff like fake bank accounts or fake merchants. So one of the things that can happen here is, let's say you want to go to Bank of America, for example. What these threat actors will do is they will clone those websites. They'll make it look exactly like the real Bank of America website, but the domain will look different. And this is, so let's say it's BOA.com for Bank of America. What they could do, and this would be a really exaggerated example that people might be able to catch pretty easily if they're paying attention, is they could go to like B0A.com, which would be like a fake website where they capture your login details, and then they can go log into Bank of America themselves and then go and drain your bank accounts. The other thing that can happen with this is fake downloads. So like I said, when I was referencing the OBS stuff earlier, like where there was legit pieces of software that had malvertising campaigns ran, is you end up with a fake download, and then all of a sudden that gives you a virus. And then the other thing with redirects is they can also use that to harvest your data through tracking pixels. So when I say malvertising, like people might think, oh, okay, well that's how you get like ransomware or fileless malware or something like that, but it doesn't even have to be that. What they could do is just be harvesting your data, because data is worth a ton of money nowadays. And if you guys want a breakdown of why that is, I can make a video, because I know this stuff from like a cybersecurity perspective, but also, like I said, from being a media buyer. There's a reason why people's data is worth so much money. And like I said, if you guys want to see a breakdown of why, I can go ahead and make a video talking about that. But they can use a tracking pixel, like basically like cookies or a pixel or something to that effect, where you visit the website, and then that tracks everywhere else you go. So it will track the websites you visit. It could potentially log your login details and stuff like that. This is some pretty nasty shit, really. So here's how this thing can manifest itself. So it comes in a few different ways here. So first off, this is a pretty common one, is scareware, like fake antivirus and pop-ups. So like you go to visit a website, you don't have like a ad block or anything like that. Now, browsers these days are pretty decent with blocking pop-ups, but they're still not great. I've had it happen before. I've seen it happen through professional IT environments where people would go and visit an infected website, and there would be pop-ups that would show up on the screen saying, hey, your computer is infected. And even though we had security measures installed on those computers, this stuff was able to bypass it. And so the thing is if you go and start interacting with that pop-up, let's say you download a link or whatever, it makes it look like it's a legit warning, like, hey, you have an infected computer, or this website is infected, click here to clean this up. It's, like I said, it's scareware, and they're trying to get you to download stuff so they can infect your computer. The other thing is, the other way that this can manifest itself is through clickjacking. Now, with clickjacking, typically what this is you have, so let's say you have an advertisement load on a website, and the thing with this is it could be a legit advertisement, but with clickjacking is there's a malicious element that's overlaid over the legit element, so then you click on something, you think that it's going to do one thing, but it actually does another. So let's say you click on it, you think you're clicking on an ad to go to one place, but you're actually clicking on an ad to go to another place. This stuff is pretty nasty, and it's the way that it has propagated. It's really common is because of vulnerabilities in code, bad plugins, or vulnerabilities in plugins. So it could be malicious plugins or plugins that have bugs that haven't been patched out yet. And the way, so a lot of the internet is built on WordPress. I know this from my time like doing web development. A lot of websites use WordPress. And the thing with WordPress is because it powers something like, I think 70 or 80% of the internet right now. When you have that much usage, it's just like Windows. The reason you hear about viruses in Windows so much is because it has the most user base. The reason that like web developers know that there's so many security problems with WordPress is because it's the most used, therefore it's the most attacked platform. And so there's constant updates that are going in the background, but a lot of times these hackers will figure out ways to work around it. And the thing with WordPress is it really starts to, I'm not speaking ill of WordPress by any means. It's a great way to design a website. But where things really start to fall apart is when people start using some sort of custom code or a bunch of different plugins. Plugins aren't being updated and things like that. So with the code side of things, let's say you write a piece of bad code, custom piece of CSS code or HTML or something like that. You put that on your website. Well, the threat actors are able to use that as a vulnerability. So that's where you could have a perfectly legit website. Everything could look great, and you don't notice this right away, and your visitors come in and start getting infected, and then they start getting pissed off at you and saying, hey, your website gave me a virus, is that these hackers are able to figure out how to do clickjacking on a legit website. Now, the other thing that can happen here is that it could be an issue with the website owners themselves. I know people might think, well, if you're going to pay to make a website, spend all that time and money, all that kind of stuff, why would there be malicious website owners out there? Believe me, there are some real shitbags out there that they don't give a damn about people, and they just want to try and cause as much havoc as possible. So the other thing that this can manifest itself in is malicious website owners who have built in these clickjacking techniques into the website. The last thing here real quick is watering hole attacks. So what could happen with a watering hole attack as it relates to malvertising. There's other ways that you could apply a watering hole attack. What you could do, because when you run PPC ads, is you can target specific groups of people. So like on Google, for example, what I could do is run ads to, let's say, certain people at certain companies that have certain job titles. Now my PPC cost is going to be super expensive. I could probably end up paying like 20, 30, 40 bucks per click. But I can go after and target specific people to run ads to. So as far as watering hole attacks goes, what these hackers could be doing is targeting specific groups of people. So for some reason they want to hack certain businesses or hack certain C-suite level executives. So they do watering hole attacks. They run ads specifically to people that are known C-suite executives, and get those people to click on ads. So then what will end up happening from there, I mean, a lot of this stuff is pretty common, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it because I'm sure people that watch my videos already have a pretty solid overview of this stuff. But it could manifest itself through like ransomware. So let's say you go visit a website and you have like no ad block. It's not up to date on patches, things like that. You could be running Windows XP or Windows 7 or something like that. You could get a drive-by download of ransomware, and then all of a sudden your computer is no longer usable. The other thing that can happen is once you get malware on your computers, you can have network infiltration. So let's say you have one clean device that gets infected and you have 10 other devices on your network that are clean. Once malware is able to make its way into one computer, it can all of a sudden start jumping across to other computers. The other thing is spying, so it could just have a piece of, like I said, a tracking pixel, or have some sort of code like running in the background where it just spies on you, collects information, so something like a keylogger. The other thing is your computer could become part of a botnet. And then as it relates to the question that the commenter asked me, well, how can you do a breakdown of how fileless malware and malvertising go together? What can happen here is, so basically, like a malicious script gets ran, taking advantage of something like Java or HTML. Then you have, like, let's say, a PC vulnerability. So let's say hackers find some sort of an issue with Windows 11 that Microsoft hasn't caught yet. So they're going to go take advantage of it, create a new ad campaign, and get people to click on ads. Then what happens is, through that one-by-one GIF or clickjacking or click-based trigger or something like that, this is all of a sudden, this is a passive attack, like it's fileless malware. You don't have to do anything to have this happen. That virus then goes straight to your RAM. This is super simplified. If you're a security researcher watching this and you're like, wow, this is super simple. I'm trying to keep things like, give people enough detail to work with here, but not have it like overly complicated. And then you have like a registry key made that's going to load malicious PowerShell scripts. So every time you log into your computer again, because like people will say, oh, well, RAM's volatile. You shut the computer off, the RAM gets cleared out. Yes, but it creates something like, let's say a registry key with a malicious PowerShell script. So every time you log into your computer, you have that malware loaded. So let's talk about ad networks, and I'll talk about protection methods. So as it relates to ad networks, an ad network would be an example of something like Google. So you can run ads on Google, you can run ads on Twitter, all these different places. You can run ads on Amazon. Now the thing is, with like these big name providers, they know about malvertising, and they don't want the public reputation hit when something like this happens, so there's a lot of security around it. So like, for example, if I were to go and create a Google PPC campaign right now, let's say that I wanted to run ads to my website, for example, I could go and create that campaign, it could get approved, the ads could start running. But if I go and change something on there, like let's say I go and change it to go to a different domain, it all of a sudden goes through a reapproval process. They go and check things, make sure it's legit. That's good practice. That's how things should be done, because otherwise you end up with malvertising. Now, one of the things that they will end up taking advantage of, the hackers will take advantage of, is domain rotation. So, like I said, you could go and change the domain after the fact, like the campaign's already approved. Domain rotation would be something more like, I think I mentioned this briefly in the last video on fileless malware, that one of the things that hackers can do is use something called a newly registered domain, or NRD. I think the standard is around 32 days. So if it changes ownership, or if it's registered within the last 32 days, that it's considered a newly registered domain. And like some DNS providers and things like that will block it because of that case. So what can happen there is, let's say they are running a malware campaign, like let's say to the obs-studio.com, the example that I gave at the start of the video here. So let's say this domain is all of a sudden unusable, and let's say, for example, I'll just keep it simple. Let's say they all of a sudden make obs-studio2.com, which is also a malware domain. Then they all of a sudden are like, oh, okay, well, this one's getting caught, like antivirus is catching it now, all this kind of stuff. They could just go ahead and use different domains to try and continue the same campaign. The other issue that comes into practice here is poor standards. So like I said, with things like Google, they're pretty strict on this stuff. But with some of the smaller ad networks is where this can really be an issue. The other thing, like I said, is vulnerabilities. So this would be vulnerabilities within the ad networks themselves. This would be really like incredibly rare with something like Google, but it could happen with a smaller ad network. Let's say you just have like a couple hundred regional websites, and there's an agreement that, okay, well, we'll load your ads on our websites. You know, they do their fee exchange, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is they can use embedded trackers to spread malware. So like I said, this comes back to crappy ad networks. You're not going to be able to do stuff like this with Google. The other thing is like review measures and policies. So like I said, even though I've ran a lot of legit campaigns on Google, every time I go to create a new campaign, it has to go through the same review process. And it's the same with like Facebook and Twitter. Even though I've made lots of legit ad campaigns, every time I go to make something new, this is the standard across reputable ad networks, is every time you go to create a new ad campaign or you make changes to an existing one, is there should be some sort of review measure in place. Now, like I said, with a crappy ad network, they might not do that. And the other thing is, so you might be wondering, well, why the hell would people use small ad networks? Part of it could just be that people don't want to give money to like a mega corporation, which, I mean, I understand that aspect of it. The other thing could be bid pricing. So like, let's say, so in the case that I gave like a regional business running ads, they use a regional ad network and they're showing their ads across other websites across the region. So let's say you could do this with something like maybe a construction company, for example, where you're running ads. Now, I really would say that it would be much more effective to just do it over Google PPC, but a lot of people will try and do all sorts of stuff. So like, let's say your cost per click, which is your CPC, let's say it's a flat $3. Like typically you'll see like a $2 to $3 CPC. Now, I haven't used a small regional ad network, so let's say their PPC, it could be a lot lower. Let's say it's like 20 cents per click. Now, that's something that would be attractive to a lot of businesses because they're like, oh, okay, well, that's cheaper, therefore that's better value. And so that's why a lot of people end up using these ad networks, and why they exist is because of things like bid prices. It's easier to get stuff approved. Let's say you're in a prohibited industry, so like there's certain things you can't advertise on Google, for example. There are certain industries that you're not allowed to make advertisements for that maybe a small ad network would allow. So that's why, I mean, that's why these kind of things exist right here. So now let's talk about protection methods. What can you do to protect yourself against this stuff? This is really simple. Like, I can't really make it any more simple than this. Basically, first off, if applicable, let's say you're on Windows, you need to have a security suite. So if you want to just use Defender, Defender works perfectly fine. I recommend you harden it with some, for example, configure Defender. But you can just use the regular Defender without hardening it at all, and it works fine as long as you don't have like really goofy browsing habits and you're going to some really shady websites. The other thing is you could use a third-party provider, so there's a lot of good ones out there like Bitdefender or Kaspersky or Sophos or ESET. Whatever one you want, just pick one. If you're on Linux, it really doesn't apply. You could use ClamAV if you want to. And if you're a Mac OS user, you already have antivirus built in through things like Xprotect. Now, the other thing, keep your machine up to date. Some people like to turn off Windows updates. I've seen this on, I can't remember the name of the distribution or the custom ISOs that are made, but you can find custom ISOs of like Windows, for example. I think Tiny11 is an example. And even though these projects, and I don't really know much about Tiny11, I just know that it's the names of one of them. I know on some of these, they will strip out things like Windows updates. I'm telling you, I've worked professionally in the IT industry, and so there's a reason that things like critical vulnerability exploits, CVEs, that they get patched, and there's a reason why Microsoft has things like Patch Tuesday. There's a reason why Apple, even though it's very secure with the way they've designed it, why they're continually releasing updates. And I just saw some articles come out about Linux here just within the last 2 weeks or so about some major vulnerabilities that came up in Linux. Bugs are always going to be found and they always need to be updated. So you need to keep your operating system up to date. This is super important, and I don't understand why the hell people turn updates off, because I've read comments in like subreddits where people will say things like, oh, well, I know something about computers, therefore I don't need updates and I never get infected. It's like, okay, well, have fun with like fileless malware, and then your banking details get stolen, your accounts get drained, You have your other devices on your network get hacked. Like, this is simple shit. It's not complicated, but people like to try and come up, they like to play these mental gymnastics. And I'm not saying you guys do, because I have a pretty, I would say my followers, like the people that watch these videos, they're a hell of a lot smarter than average user. I'm saying that, like, I've seen some people on like these subreddits and stuff just talk about the most insane bullshit, thinking that it's gonna work and that I don't need to run updates, and Microsoft is, it's like, okay, well, if you have such a problem with Microsoft and their telemetry, then why the hell would you even use Windows? Like, oh, well, I'll just turn off updates. Okay, well, if it's that big of an issue to you, then just use Linux. That's the way that I look at it. Like I said, I'm not talking to you, the people that are watching this video, because I'd say my viewers are pretty damn intelligent about this stuff, especially if you're watching these kind of videos. The other thing I'm going to cover real quick is browsers. Any sort of just regular reputable browser out there, there's actually quite a few of them. I know there's privacy issues with these, but you could use something like Chrome or Edge. But then you also have like good ones, and I know people will try and argue with me on this. Like Brave, I consider to be a good browser. Out of the box, for an average home user, Brave is really good. It blocks ads, it's really fast, it's built on Chromium. I know people say, well, it's part of the Google ecosphere. Like, okay, whatever, they built it on Chromium, but I still think Brave is a really good browser. The other thing you could use is, like Firefox is a really good one. The other one that I recommend checking out, if you haven't used it before, or if you haven't used it, or if you haven't heard of it, whatever, is LibreWolf. This is a super freaking awesome browser because it has, Firefox has telemetry built in. You have to go turn the telemetry off. And then it also has things so like the standard security settings for the browser. It doesn't come with things like an ad block or anything like that. LibreWolf is like super maximum security by default out of the box, and it has ad block built in. So you're getting Firefox with like the maximum security settings. LibreWolf is really nice. Now the other thing is an ad blocker. So when it comes to ad blockers, there's only one. I'm serious, there's only one that I recommend, and that is uBlock Origin. This is an excellent ad blocker. So I don't know how many people are aware of this, but I've been seeing some comments coming up on Reddit threads that YouTube is now trying to block ad blockers. uBlock Origin isn't playing that game. So if you want to get around like just regular crappy ads, this works really well. But it also, like, it's great for protecting against things like malvertising because it just blocks a whole bunch of ads. It blocks trackers. This is a really good blocker. Now, there's one other thing that I recommend that probably isn't recommended a lot in the IT community right now, and that is encrypted DNS. I recommend this for a few different reasons. First off, you can protect yourself against some attacks like DNS cache poisoning and spoofing. You get a tiny, like I'm talking like the tiniest little increase in privacy because it encrypts your DNS traffic. Typically your DNS traffic is not encrypted. And so you, like I said, it's like super tiny privacy increase. Like you're not gonna be able to hide any sort of activities when you encrypt your DNS, but it's a nice little privacy boost. The big benefit when you use encrypted DNS, depending on the provider that you use, is you can block a ton of malware. And I've said this before, I'll keep saying it. If you can block out any potential malware before it makes it to your computer, it's less of a chance that it can make it past your antivirus. So here's what I'm talking about when I say encrypted DNS. So I talked about how you can stop malware using encrypted DNS. It's a video that I think I made like 3 or 4 months ago. If you want a ton of details, you can go watch that one. I'll just give you the quick breakdown here. So this is where they tested public DNS malware filters. So they only tested things that did not require an account. So they didn't test things like Control-D or NextDNS. The reason I like encrypted DNS so much is because it's actually really damn good at blocking malware. And so the two that I recommend, if you don't want to make a user account, you want to have good privacy. So Quad9 is a really good one. This is like, let's say you are a US user or you're in Canada or something like that. You'd want to use Quad9 because if you use DNS0, you're going to run into loading time issues because DNS0 only has servers over in Europe, whereas Quad9 has servers in North America. So let's say you're a US user, you could use this one. Now, these do not have accounts. They are plug and play. You just plug in the DNS settings into your browser. You're good to go. You're off and running. Or you could do it at the operating system level with something like Portmaster. And so these will block out a ton of malware, and you can see here. Now, it says things like, oh, higher score is better. Okay, well, why would I not use DNS 0 as opposed to Quad 9? You can run into, every now and then, you'll run into legit domains getting blocked. And I'm also I'm super careful with my browsing habits, so I'm not worried about that extra 15, 20% that I could get with a different provider. Quad 9 works really well. Now, if you want, you could, like I said, you could use DNS 0, and if you're in the EU, this is a good option. Now, if you want to customize your DNS block lists, what you can do is use a service like NextDNS or Control-D. Those require user accounts, so there is a layer of trust that you have to have there, that they're not correlating the websites that you visit with your identity. I believe they both say in their privacy policies that they don't track stuff unless, like, you can enable tracking and see, like, stuff that's getting blocked out and all that. So, I mean, there's a layer of trust that is added there that you have to trust them. But like I said, if you just want something plug and play, you don't have to make an account and you can just block a lot of garbage from the get-go. Seriously, like, all it is you go into your browser, you add one line of code or one line, so like Quad 9, you just go to their website, copy paste over the line for DNS over HTTPS, and boom, you all of a sudden have encrypted DNS, and you're able to block out a whole bunch of malware. So that's going to wrap the video up. If you guys like it, go ahead and let me know. I'm trying out some new teaching styles here, so I'm sure those of you that have been around for a minute or two have probably noticed that these kind of videos here where I'm using this this method of like drawing stuff out and all that kind of stuff, like, this is new for me. So if you have suggestions or improvements you'd like to see, go ahead and drop those down in the comments and let me know. If you have any specific types of comments that you want to see, let me know. I would definitely appreciate it. And also, if you made it to this far in the video, shout out to you. The secret call out, let's just say 45 minutes. I haven't edited this down. I don't think there will be much edited out because I can make long form content really easily. And I love making long form content. I don't really enjoy all that much making like 10-minute videos because they end up being so superficial that I can't cover a lot of details that I want to be able to cover. But if you guys do want to see more like 10-minute videos, let's say like a super quick breakdown of something, go ahead and drop, like I said, drop comments, whatever kind of content you guys want to see, like cybersecurity stuff or systems administration or some other tech related thing, because that's like my domain is technology. If you guys want to see something in particular, just let me know. And also, as always, thank you for the support. These last couple of months have been insane. The channel's growing massively. Like, things are looking really good, and I'm pretty excited for where next year, like January, but especially like I think by next summer, like in my 1-year mark from when I started posting videos on this channel, it's the transformation is going to be absolutely massive, and it's all because of the audience. So like I said, I really appreciate your viewership, and shout out to you if you made it this long in the video. Anyway, that's going to wrap the video up. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you on Monday.